Welcome to our podcast. I'm Janice, and with me is Angela Jordan, Entecom franchise owner in East London. Today is the start of a three-part series as we discuss what you should be looking for as a food business owner before committing to a new food premises or possibly even upgrading an existing food premises. And we're hopefully giving you some pointers to consider before you commit to spending any money on upgrades or investing in new premises. Welcome, Angela, and having worked with many food companies over the years, I'm sure you've seen many mistakes made. But before we get into that, perhaps you can tell us why having the correct food premises is important.
Thank you, Janice. The most important point to remember here is food safety, food safety, food safety. By having unsuitable premises, you're increasing the potential to contaminate your much loved product. This contamination could lead to either an unsafe product, which could harm the consumer, or a product where the shelf life could be compromised.
What sort of mistakes have you seen food business owners make when it comes to their food premises?
We have seen quite a few worrying situations that seriously affect the safety of the product and the workers by being in quite a few different food handling premises. The first is to be careful where you start your business. You need to take into consideration what the next step you will be taking should you want to expand. We have seen businesses start in garages, what could be fine for a startup, but if your business grows too quickly, you're obviously going to have an increased amount of raw materials coming in, increased amount of final product, as well as additional staff in the facility and possibly new equipment. Soon your facility will become very cluttered with no clear areas for storage, production, and staff movement. This is often when mistakes happen and the quality of your product could be at risk. We've also seen businesses building onto their current structure without much thought as to future extensions. The most important aspect you need to remember here is the flow of your product manufacturing. You need to have a clear starting point and a clear end point. Your receiving area needs to flow into your production area, which then needs to flow into your packaging area, which then needs to flow into your dispatch area. A practical example here we could use could be vegetable processing. You cannot have your storage area for your incoming vegetables, which are likely very dirty and unwashed, in an area that needs to move past your clean-cut vegetables, which would obviously contaminate those vegetables. With unplanned extensions, we've also seen open exterior drains within production facilities and open wastewater furrows coming from wash-up areas, dirty wash-up areas, flowing through a packaging area where the final product is exposed, which could lead to contamination.
A lot to think about here, Angela. What do you think was the biggest mistake that was learned from this?
You need to consider the bigger picture right from the beginning. Have a plan of how your business premises will grow without compromising your product.
Yes, the mistake of jumping in the deep end without taking the time to step back and see the bigger picture, I think, was the problem here. The importance of actually drawing your site plan and looking at each part of the process and all the activities that will be performed in each of those processes is so important. Planning and really thinking through everything in a lot of detail. Do you think that had this business owner had food safety training that he may have done things differently?
Absolutely. Training is a must for the business owner. He or she needs to know exactly what needs to be in place before jumping into owning a production facility. It always amazes me that so many businesses do not realize that there are regulations out there that could assist them in how their business should be structured. Another example of a mistake that we've often seen is when a small business is trying to expand by becoming a supplier to a national retailer, they often hesitate in putting the required food safety systems in place. We had a client a few years ago, or a very short-term client a few years ago, who were provisionally supplying a national retailer with the agreement that they would put a documented food safety system in place within a certain time period. The company unfortunately did not see the value in putting this system in place. Only after the retailer had taken their contract away did they agree to put the system in place. But by then it was too late, and unfortunately this business had to close down.
So what's the lesson here, do you say, Angela?
The lesson here is know who your customers are and what their requirements are. Know exactly what systems you need to have in place for those customers.
This is such a sad example to hear, and I think that sometimes business owners start out with an idea, find a premises to start operating from, and then later on a new opportunity for a different or new product comes along from a potentially large client but their premises does not support the required food safety environment for the new product, and they jump right in without ensuring that their premises are suitable. What do you say should this business owner have done first before accepting this business?
This owner needs to assess what risks could occur within the manufacturing facility when you manufacture the new product, and the capability of his facility to manufacture this new product. Will he compromise his other products by accepting this new product? If it is a viable contract, the owner needs to then look at restructuring the flow of the facility or extending the facility, but in an effective manner.
So when we look at the types of questions that food business owners should be asking themselves, what do you say? What are the main important points?
I have 3 important points to discuss. The first one is decide who your target market is. Are you wanting to supply a local cafe, a local retailer, a national chain store, or eventually export your product? What type of system do they want you to have in place before you can supply them? Do they maybe want you to have something like a minimum legal requirement, such as your regulation 638? Or are they wanting you to have a full HACCP system or partial HACCP system in place, such as your GFSI, BRC, or FSSC? It's very important to know what systems are needed, as these systems have many similarities, but they all have their own requirements. So we need to know exactly what does your customer want. The second important point to consider is, does your business have a certificate of acceptability? If not, you need to get one. This is a legal requirement for your facility. Contact your local municipal health department. An environmental health practitioner will then visit your premises, and should your facility comply with what is required in the regulation, they will issue you with the certificate. So whether you're the corner cafe with 1 worker or a huge factory with 800 workers, every premises in South Africa that sells food to consumers needs to have the certificate in place. It is illegal to operate without it. The third point I want to mention is know what your minimum requirements are. Know what your regulation 638 says. It talks about some structural issues within that regulation, as well as some non-structural issues. Structural issues that one needs to consider is things like your environment. Where's your facility situated? Are you going to be putting it in a place where it is not conducive to manufacture safe food? You don't want to have it next to a landfill site that's going to have pests, increased pests, or next to a factory billowing out toxic smoke. You also need to consider your layout of your facility. Your flowing from dirty to clean area, how your product and your raw material and your staff move through the facility. Walls and floors are also mentioned in the regulation, as well as equipment. It must be non-toxic, easy to clean, and rust-free. Ventilation and illumination are also mentioned in the regulation. Some non-structural items, such as temperature control, are very important to consider. Annex E talks about the required temperatures for your chilled products, your heated products, your frozen products, and make sure you understand exactly what your legal requirements are when it comes to temperature. Pest control is also mentioned. You need to make sure that your facility is guarded against pests. And then, of course, your staff and hygiene requirements. Annex D talks about the number of latrines and toilets required within the facility for the number of staff and customers that you may have. Hand washing facilities are also mentioned. Change rooms, the required PPE. The regulation also talks about staff hygiene, such as conditions for work conduct, and reporting of illness. So as you can see, there's quite a lot that one needs to consider before opening up your business, and it's important to understand exactly what your requirements are.
Absolutely, Angela. And I think that in conclusion, maybe I can just give 5 tips that I've got from what you've told us and what you've shared with us today. The first is, make sure that you have the basic food safety training before you even start a food business. Familiarize yourself with the regulation, the R638 food hygiene regulation. Understand what that regulation requires. And third, ask for expert advice before you start spending money. Talk to a food safety consultant, an engineer, get architects who have experience with designing and setting up food premises to come and visit your premises before you start spending any money. 4, draw everything in detail and think through all activities that are going to be taking place in each area. Plan review and plan again. And 5, think about your current market and where you want to grow your business as well. Will the premises support growth or the volumes during seasonal spikes? These are important questions that you need to ask before you start. So, yeah, thank you, Angela, for taking part in our podcast and for sharing your experience with us. We look forward to part 2, where we will be discussing the COA, the Certificate of Acceptability for your food premises.
Thank you, Janice. Yes, I look forward to meeting with our listeners again in podcast 2.
Thank you for listening to our podcast, and please give us a call if you need any assistance with your facility layout or any other food safety advice. You'll find our contact details on our website, and we look forward to hearing from you soon.